If there were any man busier between the years of 1879 and 1886 than my friend and colleague Sherlock Holmes, I could not say who that man was. No novelist, no industrialist, no amateur pornographer. That is not to say that this period of diligence was solely a time of triumph. There had been a great number of imperious successes, a modicum of inevitable failures, and one right fuck-up. All of these I had noted and laid before the public in my previous memoirs. Alas, one case remained entombed amongst my medical records, not for the eye of man nor beast, nor man-beast. I remember it clearly. I was seated at the breakfast table, having risen later than I had intended, which was more than I could say for my illustrious fellow, who had nearly got a wink of sleep. He remained where I had left him at 7:45 the evening of 4, stood bowed at the foremost window, keenly observing each twist and shout of the fair capital's bustling populace.
He's out there.
These were the words with which my good friend Sherlock Holmes greeted me on the morning of the 23rd of December, 1884. A heavy London sky, laden with snow, silhouetted his aquiline profile. I wondered exactly which of the capital's notorious criminals was causing him to stare with such intent out into the festive melee below. "Who's that, dear fellow?" I inquired. As he turned to face me, his look of concern gave way to one of exultation.
Why, Father Christmas, of course.
"Oh, really, Holmes," I began wearily. The holiday season was always an extraordinary affair at 221B Baker Street. I never failed to be amazed that the finest mind in the whole of the empire, that of Sherlock Holmes, could still flounder under the misapprehension that Father Christmas existed. This was his one and only weakness, save for the fact that he was allergic to kryptonite.
"Watson,"
he exclaimed, setting down his violin carelessly in a tureen of creme fraiche.
"not only do I know that Father Christmas is out there, but I can prove it."
It was indeed, I had cause to reflect, a rare occurrence that the great man could be incorrect in one of his suppositions. On this occasion, however, he was testing my meter intolerably. "Then do so," I challenged. He beckoned me over to the window to view the very same aspect which had caused his earlier ejaculation. I looked keenly, but could not vouchsafe the evidence with my own eyes.
"Honestly, man, look! There!"
He pointed out a considerable but infirm fellow, dressed from head to toe in red velvet with grubby white ermine detail, holding a sack full of Christmas gifts and sweetmeats. A rather dramatic apparel that was becoming increasingly common among those who wished to purport to be the Yuletide patron saint, whether for charitable purposes or otherwise. "A man dressed as Father Christmas?" I answered. He looked at me expectantly, an expression that faltered as I returned his gaze with one of disbelief.
"It is a matter of simple deduction, Watson. There is a man dressed as Father Christmas. Who is it that is most likely to be dressed in such a manner than dear Saint Nick himself?"
"You're being quite ridiculous now. I shall rustle us up some breakfast." He grabbed my arm fiercely before I could call Mrs. Hudson's attention, and drew me back to the sill. I was quite astonished at his fervour.
"You see that man on the corner?"
I nodded that I did.
"Who would you say he was?"
"Why, that's the milkman."
"And what is it that brings you to that conclusion?"
"Really, Holmes, because he is wearing a milkman's uniform, the orange cowboy hat and the leopard skin skirt."
"Exactly. Because he is dressed as a milkman, as you say, although you neglected to mention the strontium clogs and wicker fob watch, you assume he is a milkman, in this case quite correctly. And yet, you see a man dressed as Father Christmas, but do not assume that he is exactly so. Two identical scenarios, two unidentical applications of analysis. Have you learnt nothing that I have taught you?
Tired, I returned my gaze to the morning's paper. There were the usual tales of robberies and murder, marriages and deaths, harpers and queens, and a particularly charming sketch of some puppies on page 3. Alas, not all the news was good. My dear old regimental chum, Colonel Rover's Assortment, whom I had served with in Afghanistan alongside Corporals Huntley and Palmer, had passed away. He had died in his sleep, under the wheels of the 217 from Euston to Norwich. He had at least died doing what he loved most, sleeping on railway lines. What saddened me most was that I had missed his funeral. It sounded a most venerable ceremony, as he was buried next to his old school. Alas, there was no information on why his old school had been buried.